So I think we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today for teaching during the pandemic. This is part 3 of the Innovation in Materials and Manufacturing series. I'm Gokul Gopal. I'm the incoming director of the Regional Materials and Manufacturing Network, or RM2N. The RM2N is a network focused in areas of material science and engineering, as well as their applications to manufacturing processes and technology. We bring together faculty, staff, and students from across the UW system and industry partners from across the state. And our primary goal is to help streamline research collaborations across our different campuses and with industry. It's been a pleasure to work in partnership with our colleagues from WiSys to bring you this virtual series. I'd like to acknowledge a few people who made this event possible. From WiSys, I would like to thank Jennifer Souter, Tony Hansen, and Craig Sawyer for doing all the hard work needed to organize and execute this virtual series. Also, I'd like to thank Helen Evanson from Uw-Platteville and William Parker from UW Parkside for judging the student presentations yesterday. At the end of today's session, we will be announcing the winners of those student presentations. So today, we'll be hearing about how faculty from across the system have adapted and developed innovative teaching methods to deliver remote or hybrid content to students, both in lectures and in labs. Following their presentations, we'll have 2 short breakout sessions for informal discussion, where we get to share more ideas on what's worked well as what kinds of pitfalls we should avoid. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. So to get the most out of your viewing experience, we encourage you to use speaker view on Zoom and ask that you leave your audio and video turned off during the main presentations. Each talk will last about 5 or 6 minutes, and there'll be a couple minutes after each presentation for questions. You can either type your questions into the chat window during the presentations, or after the presentations, when you're prompted, you can turn on your audio and video and directly ask the speaker your question. Following the presentations, we'll be moved to dedicated breakout sessions, and we encourage you to use this opportunity for additional Q&A with the speakers, but also to engage with everyone else in the room and discuss your experiences. Each breakout will be guided by a person from WiSys or RM2N, and they'll be there just to help facilitate the discussion, treat it as an informal gathering, right? Okay, so I think that's all of the important stuff. So I think we're ready to get started. Our first speaker today is Matthew Jewell from Material Science and Engineering at UW-Eau Claire. Matt, are you ready to start?
I think I am, Gokul.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks a lot for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. Glad to have you all here. I was really glad to hear we're going to do this session. Like all of you, I got plunged into this online and hybrid teaching world sort of against my will last spring, but as we've been trying to do it now over the course of a year, been a lot of good learning experiences, so I'm glad we're going to get to share a few of those together today. For me, something I've been trying to focus on over the last year is just this issue of engagement. How do we engage students in this more online environment? And of course, I'm not the first to try and think about it, but I'll just share a few of my own thoughts of what I've been trying and hopefully hear some feedback from you too. Specifically, over the winter term here, what really kind of sharpened my focus on this topic was I taught my first really fully asynchronous class, not hybrid, not partly synchronous, but taught a fully asynchronous course here, and it was the second semester of our capstone sequence, which for us in the second semester we focused more on data analysis and on writing, communication skills. So for students that have their projects, their experimental work largely finished up, it's a good opportunity to get out if they don't need to stay for the spring semester. So really kind of made me think more about kind of how do we do this asynchronous environment and how do we kind of build student engagement in there. I see we're going to have a talk later in the session about larger classes, so this should be a good complement to it. Probably my comments here are a little more relevant for smaller classes. All right, so just four things that I found were helpful for me in the asynchronous online environment. So number one, some kind of way of seeing people. So I found a couple easy ways to just integrate some video. I just feel like it sucks the life out of the class if you can't be seeing each other and hearing from each other once in a while, even if it has to be asynchronous. So a tool I found I really liked was Flipgrid. Just an easy, it does require an institutional subscription, but just an easy way to do some online videos. You know, I give a prompt, the students give a little 30-second or 60-second or 90-second response. I can give feedback to that. Other students can give feedback. It's great for, you know, I'm focusing on some writing things in my class. So great for having them reflect on, think about their writing. But, you know, you can also do it for more kind of technical questions, you know, have somebody just talk you through how they responded to a question or what approach they tried to use to solve it. I found that pretty helpful and just a little way of building some engagement, even if we weren't kind of with each other. Okay, so that was an easy thing, and I like that tool. Flipgrid was pretty easy to implement for me. Then second, I tried to build in, and you know, maybe the rules about asynchronous classes may be different from campus to campus, but I did try to build in at least one synchronous contact point every week. So just a weekly check-in by Zoom. And this was also just really good for getting the students together in one place and building a little bit of community. And also this was just a good kind of way of forcing them to take sort of a second bite at the apple of, you know, certain topics that we were dealing with or working through in the class. And then now with the weekly check-in, I can give them an additional reflection prompt or tell them they have to come prepared to talk about a homework problem or something like that. So I try to make this as structured as I could, not open-ended, not Q&A, not office hours, but you know, you're going to come to this weekly check-in and be prepared. I'm going to ask you about X or Y or Z. And that for me was also a good way to do a little bit of just one-on-one engagement. Okay, third thing I did, you know, you can't be the one to have to do all the engaging with the students, no matter what the class size. So of course, building in some peer interactions can be really helpful there. And here I think there's a lot of things out there in terms of how to do this well. So I don't have to go over them in detail, I don't think. But you know, some things you might even do in a normal class, like in my intro classes, I do these think, pair, share exercises that I think are a pretty standard learning tool now, where you have, you know, two students working together and talking each other through how they're thinking about the problem in front of them. You can do that online with Flipgrid or other video tools. You can still have people essentially doing think, pair, share exercises. You can have them interacting via discussion boards or doing video responses. You can still do some peer review. You know, I have mixed feelings in general about the value of peer review depending on the situation and what we're doing. But under certain circumstances, I found that to also work here in the online environment. We could talk more about that maybe in the Q&A if we want to. So a little bit of peer interaction, I think also really helpful just for kind of breaking some of those asynchronous walls that get built. Okay, and then fourth, this was just kind of a term I picked up. You know, our friends over in education studies, they love to build a lot of vocabulary in their discipline, just as we all do in our disciplines. So this idea of scaffolding the engagement, which kind of sounds sophisticated, but it's a really simple idea, and I kind of latched onto it. I loved it. We all know what it means to scaffold content in our curriculum, right? We all understand that we have to start with simple ideas, build up to sophisticated ideas. We have to come back multiple times, iterate on key concepts so students understand them. And that's scaffolding. That's just scaffolding our content. And the insight for me was we can do the same thing for engagement. We're thinking about how do we draw students in? How do we get students thinking about the course and responding to us in the course? We can scaffold that engagement. In other words, we can find little ways to kind of build up to more sophisticated engagement, and we can give them just multiple ways, even just to study the material. All right, here's a simple thing I did. It's a writing course, and so we're talking about writing concisely. And I tell you what, every university in the country has a writing center, which has a web page about writing concisely. So instead of giving them one and saying, read through this and then answer some questions or talk about it, give them three and say, pick one, right? So it just introduces some sense of kind of choice. And so giving them some different ways to study material. And then also, you know, if it allows and you have the time for it, just allowing them to have some different ways of responding or demonstrating their learning. All right, so you got to think about what's manageable for you and your class, but give them some flexibility. Certain questions or types of assignments, maybe it could be either a written response or an audio response or a video response. All right, I think we underestimate how much in the in-person class we build in the engagement, right? We talk and we're watching the visual feedback, we're asking questions, and then we are adapting what we're saying in front of people based on that feedback. So just little things we can do here to give them some opportunities to feedback to us, they can make a big difference. Okay, I better stop there. But a couple things are helpful for me. Happy to talk through any more of that in the Q&A or the breakout sessions later.
Awesome, thank you, Matt. So does anybody have a question for Matt? We've got time for one question.
I see there's one in the chat, Gokul, so if I can.
Yep, so let me read it out.
Yeah.
So do you think that some of these techniques will carry forward even when in-person classes resume?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in some sense, it's the opposite, right? That a lot of these techniques existed in the in-person class. It's more a matter of trying to adapt them for online. But I do think so. I'll say for myself, for example, just the simple idea of, hey, if you're giving an assignment, certain assignments, maybe I don't need a 200-word mini essay from everybody on this. Maybe I could let them give a little video response or an audio response if it's appropriate for the content type. So I'm going to try to continue to have some more flexibility there, and I think students like being able to pick that.
Okay, I've got one more question from Anne-Marie Lerner, and the question is: did you have your check-in time coded into Pass or some sort of registration software?
Yes, excellent. Excellent question. So again, I sort of alluded to that. I said, rules may be different on your campus. So in my case, my class was small enough. I was able to do it informally, and the students didn't complain. But indeed, in a larger class, or depending on your circumstances, you may need to try to get that coded in so that you have that time block in there every week. So I did not have to do that. I was able to work around that. But yeah, that's absolutely a thing you maybe need to think about depending on the number of students in there.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. All right, so next, our next speaker today is Anne-Marie Lerner from Mechanical Engineering at Uw-Platteville. Are you
Hello,
ready, Anne-Marie?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
Excellent.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to talk today. So when I started thinking about my fall semester, I had the fun of teaching sort of a senior level robotics technical elective, which I was really excited about. But I'm teaching it purely remotely, and this is the first time I've ever taught that class. So I was kind of a little nervous, and I really thought it was going to be valuable. I can't see if I'm actually annotating with my mouse. It doesn't look like it. That's okay. Look at the upper left-hand quadrant. I didn't do sophisticated animation. Oh, there it is. So it was very important to me that students should be able to prototype and play with robotics. They should understand, what is it that I'm trying to design and how does that actually work in reality? And that's a challenge in a pandemic. And I further realized I had students who were sheltering in place at home, and at home was across the state, across the country. And in one case, I actually had a student who was stuck in China, in that he literally could not return without a 3-week quarantine, and so was just place bound there. I also wanted to try a low fidelity to sort of play with things, and low fidelity is prototyping with found objects. And then moving to medium fidelity, so going to the machine shop, doing CNC, something like that, where it's more of a functional prototype. For the robotics class specifically, what I really wanted to do was create some sort of design project that forced students to think outside a traditional rectilinear coordinate system. We really like our XYZ with nice right angles. And I wanted students to have to deal with some sort of curvature, because that's a challenge we notice with our students, and have some sort of relevance, and also force them to think about experiences of people who are not themselves. And so what I hit on for this semester was, it's a bit timely. So I said, we're going to design the coronavirus unmanned remote tester, or CURT, with the idea of a robot to go through and scan folks' temperatures, you know, for when they would go to the hospital or to any public setting, to just do that sort of cursory screening for COVID. There were a couple of key constraints I put in place. One, they were not allowed to assume that the forehead is flat, because again, I wanted to have that curvature bit of it. So you can't just use an XY printer kind of straight across. That doesn't work. And I also did the exotherm, which you do use in a swiping motion. So I know that there are stationary guns, but yes, you can absolutely make those kind of constraints. I also shipped, so students who were within 30 miles had to pick up Arduino kits that had sensors and a few motors. For those who live further away, those got shipped to them. So they at least had the electronics there. Now, when we got into low fidelity prototyping, I told students, there was actually a lot of anxiety about what a low fidelity prototype was. So I actually did demonstrate for them with found objects. So, you know, I demonstrated, hey, this button fell off a coat. Here are some leftover straws I had from my last time I ordered Culvers. And, you know, here's a rubber band that I found in the bottom of my junk drawer. And here I'm making a remote sensor. And so I had students using solo cups, cardboard, you know, found objects around. So what you're looking at here are actually final products, because while I intended that second prototype would be a more of a medium fidelity, I didn't estimate really or predict that COVID was going to continue to have worse infection numbers as the fall dragged on. And so I had actually probably a third of my student body that was in enforced quarantine at any given time. And if you live in China, they don't have Home Depot. So that was a learning curve for me. And so a lot of students ended up having to lo-fi prototype for their final design too. And what's really interesting is you can actually come up with some really interesting prototypes with found materials. So for example, spaghetti and glue creates quite an interesting looking prototype. And so what I'm pointing to now is actually a prototype made out of spaghetti and glue. So you can do quite a bit with found materials. And this is still synced up with, you know, the Arduino parts here. So that was really cool. Now some of the things that I'm going to be keeping going on, the low fidelity prototyping, I think is really valuable. I think in the classroom, you can do that by bringing in sort of assorted stuff and letting students dumpster dive to create their prototype, or you can give them the assignment of go home, you have a budget of $0, create a low fidelity prototype and bring it in and present. Alternatively, I had a ton of fun watching students present their 90-second videos of their prototypes in action. And a 90-second video means you're not stuck there for hours and hours and hours, and yet you can get some really fun, insightful information. You do need to show a student what a low fidelity prototype is, because otherwise they really do get concerned with what it is that you're really asking for. And that's all I've got for you. I'm glad I can make you laugh. So I will say anthropometric data is really fun to play with. When you tell students that they can't use their own measurements as a basis for making design decisions, but they have to choose someone else and then make them reflect on the impact on the design, that's a really interesting thing. So.
Anne-Marie, do you feel like you were able to achieve most of the learning objectives you had for the exercise, or do you feel like you had to kind of ratchet back on what you were trying to ultimately get them to learn?
You know, so ultimately I would have loved an outcome of, you know, developing proficiencies in a machine shop. That just wasn't a reality here. But given that that couldn't happen, I do feel like they did get the learning through the prototype and the design process. So yes.
Okay, we have a question from Well, I don't think it's a question. We've
I
got a
think I'm
bunch of
getting a lot
comments.
of great commentary. Yeah.
Yeah. So can I ask you real quick, Anne-Marie, what's the general structure of this class been before COVID?
Well, so this is my first time teaching it, so unclear. I will say that it's traditionally a lecture style, although usually there is some sort of design. I don't recall if it was with develop a physical thing or if it was just a paper design. Again, it wasn't my class. So what were the goals of the low fidelity prototyping? To demonstrate sort of proof of concept that the motion is going to be what was expected. So at this point, can it follow a curve? So some students demonstrated on their own foreheads. Other students blew up a balloon to show that, yes, it can go around a curvature. So it's one of those things where it's really easy to have a robot that goes in a curve, right? It just has a single arm and it swivels, but you can't put a robot in the middle of someone's brain. So when that happens, you actually have to think about other things.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Xiaoguang Ma from Electrical Engineering, also at Uw-Platteville.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Today we're going to talk about using Zoom and Microsoft Teams in the lecture. First, thank you for having me here. I'm really glad to share this experience because, we have been using this Microsoft Teams for more than a year. Previously, we have those because we have the PSV students and other online students. So we test this out, and it's really great. So I want to share the experience with you of using Zoom and the Microsoft Teams together to have the lecturing. First, I think Zoom is very good at lecturing. You just talk and you have the full control of your classroom. However, when you try to do group discussions or try to do small group labs or engage students in small group activities, Zoom have a lot of desire, right? So it has no dedicated group. Every single time if you want to do that, you have to do it manually. You cannot automatically assign a break room with people. Every time you assign it, it's random assigned. And there's no file sharing, such as, hey, each group member, right? So when they are not in break room, if they want to share a file, or after class, they want to share a file, they have to use another technology, such as OneDrive or Google Drive, whatever. You always have a lot of authentication issues there, so it's not very smooth. And no offline chat. Of course, Zoom meeting, how could you find offline chat, right? And all the messages are gone after. If you are not the host, it will be really hard for you to obtain the chat records. And also, if you're late to a meeting, you totally have no idea what the others were talking before you entered. And no emoji, such as I want to give a clap. In the chat to Anne-Marie, I don't know how to do that. And every single time you enter, you create as a new break room. So you have no feeling to attach to it. It's not like a home. Every time you go there, whatever you have work that was there, whatever yesterday your discussion is still there. No. So Zoom break room is not a good space for group work. However, Microsoft Teams is a totally different story. It has everything we mentioned here. All the chat, offline chat messaging, recordings. Each group can do whatever they want. It's just like a small table. They just enter a small room with everything. So students more like to go to Zoom, to Microsoft Teams, even just talk. I see a lot of talks happens in the Microsoft Teams. You know, last year I didn't count everything. I just count the last 2 months because it was too late for me to count from the beginning. They only offer you statistics up to 90 days. So when I start collecting data, it's already January. So I only collect from October. So it's from middle of October to middle of December, only 2 months. My students create more than 1,500 just chat, you know. So they really love to talk there, talk about homeworks, talk about project, talk about the class content, talk about assignments, everything they talk there, right? It's mostly offline messages, and they can have online meetings just like what we did. And, you know, they can have it anytime, all in their small channel. So it's a totally integrated, you know, file server, chat log, bulletin, messaging center, video center, everything. And the best is they can share files, such as now if you present with a PowerPoint, right? Emery just said, hey, I want to show you some parts. She had to say that, oh, it's on the left corner, so you move, you know, the Jennifer has to move the mouse there. But if you put this file in Teams, Emery can also just work on it, right? She just can simultaneously write on it, edit it anytime she wants. So just like I'm presenting, and she can work on it. When she's presenting, she can work on it without anybody to help that. And she can just circle that, draw that, or even put some pictures. You know, that's any Microsoft Teams document, any Microsoft document like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all the team members can access simultaneously and edit simultaneously. It's great to demonstrate people with those things and then work together. Not like I just talk, everything was done by one people. No, everybody can work on it. So in the small group later, I can show you how this works. It's amazing. So from, you know, our experience, Dale and I have been, you know, work with Liz for a small classroom for the lab, 1020 lab, and also work with some senior or junior level classes. It's great, and my students like it. Right, some students last semester with me. This semester we're talking about new class. The first thing they ask, where's our team space? They really love it, right? And you know, it's good for labs, small group studies, and pair studies, right? And you also have statistics. It will tell you which group is active, which group is not. So you can find the least active group and go to see what's wrong. You know, is there anything wrong with that? Some, you know, is there any, you know, people don't active just because freeloaders, or, you know, they have offline meetings, whatever you can see, right? So it gives you some statistics to the heat map, so you can understand how active students are. From Zoom team, you have no idea. So that's why, you know, we use Microsoft Teams. I can show you more detail when we have the break room. All right.
Fantastic. So, thank you, Xiaoguang. Does anyone have, we have time for maybe one quick question. Does anyone have a question? If not, we can maybe save it for a breakout room. Okay. Thank you. So let's move on then to our next speaker. We have William Parker from the physics department at UW Parkside. And William, you're here.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to tell you about my experience having students do basic physics experiments at home. So this course is, it services the biology majors at our campus, and so it's the algebra-based physics course. It's a required course for them, and typically we have completely full enrollment. So this was about 80 students. And one of the big issues that I find in that class is that students have difficulty connecting the abstractions that they're reading about or learning about in lecture to their actual experiences. And for me, that's one of the goals of the lab, is to make them concretely experience things like momentum and torque. And so for me, that means that I wasn't satisfied with the idea of having students work online in virtual labs or simulated labs. I really wanted them to get experience manipulating objects and measuring things about them, because that's another big learning outcome in our lab, is for them to get experience with measurements and how to quantify uncertainty and analyze that. So let me turn on my, okay, I wasn't sure how we do the annotation thing, but if you, so the way that I envisioned this happening is that they would create experiments from simple equipment that they could procure at home, and then report them on Canvas through images and videos, and making figures using PowerPoint, and analyzing the data in Excel. So for the PowerPoints, I gave them templates and then asked them to just edit small details on them and produce output images that they would embed into their Canvas pages. And the same with with Excel. I would give them a template spreadsheet which would have some missing pieces, typically like the main formula that's the idea of the experiment. And then they would have to create the formula and propagate it and then put in their data that they collected. So in the bottom 4 images, you can see there's a student with a different set. There were 4 total experiments. What was one of the choices that I made in doing it this way is that we drastically reduce the number of experiments that we have the students do. Typically, when we're in person in the laboratory and we're setting things up for them, we're doing an experiment every week with a few breaks, so that's usually 12 experiments in a semester. So here I scaled it back to 4, and the first experiment it's actually the 3rd photo from the left here, the one with the WD-40 canister, was to build a balance. So they could just get the experience of building something from scratch on their own, and then if they didn't have access to any sort of standardized mass, I asked them to use coins, so pennies and nickels. And that lab was the only lab that I had each student do on their own. So that it ended up being a lot of work for me as an instructor. It's a grade, but I had them take an image of them with their multiple images with their balance beam, or I could let them have the option of making a video to showcase the same thing, but zeroing the balance and calibrating it with different amounts of pennies and nickels, and then measuring a couple of objects that they had a reference mass for. Then the other 3 labs, I asked them to work in groups and split the labor of building and running the experiment from analyzing the data and then reporting on the experiment. And for the most part, that worked pretty well. There were always issues with students that dropped out in the middle of the semester. So some groups had a shift in labor. And there were a few groups where one of the students just did nothing for a long time and would not respond to communication. And that created problems too. But for the students that engaged at all, it seemed like it was a great experience. It was good. I mean, people would build these experiments in different ways. I guess I forgot to tell you what the other 3 experiments were. The one on the far left is rolling a ball down a ramp to measure the acceleration due to gravity. And I'm up top on the upper left doing the first drop. So I first asked them to drop it next to a meter, drop something next to a meter stick, and it's really too fast for them to get anything that's statistically significant in that time frame. It's close to your reaction time. But with the ramp, you can measure, you can slow it down and actually get multiple positions and times. And then the third experiment, the second one in groups, is the far bottom right image. You can see that she's got 2 meter sticks with a marble stuck in the middle, and then there's one at the far end close to her shoulder. This was the collisions experiment, where I had them collide marbles of the same size. They didn't have to be marbles, but just objects that would bounce and roll smoothly without slowing down significantly, and look for the conservation of momentum in collisions. And then the fourth experiment, the final one, is the second from the bottom left one, and that was to measure the properties of pendulums. So they had to suspend some ball of some kind from the ceiling, 2 different mass balls, and then they varied the length and they varied the starting angle. And that experiment actually produced the clearest data. So one of the downsides of letting them do it on their own is, they experienced the pitfalls of not understanding how to reduce the uncertainty in their measurements and to track down errors. So I think if I were to do this again in this kind of a setup, I would probably include an additional feedback step where they can go back and try to find problems that occurred in their data. And I think that's everything I had to say. Like I said, I think it was overall a good experience. And like Matt mentioned at the beginning, it was important to have students present themselves. Like I asked them to explicitly include their face in every lab at least once with their experimental setup, so they sort of have ownership of it. It's their thing. And I didn't really have any problems with people not doing that. Gokul, how are we on time? Do I have time to show people a couple videos?
I think one less than 1 minute video.
Let one of some. Okay, could we pop forward to the video slide? And let's just look at the very first one in the upper left. So this is the balance experiment. So you can't hear him talk, but he's basically saying, what he did to build the balance, and you can see the one that he built there. I didn't actually prescribe how they were build the balance. I gave them a list of several possible ways they could do it. You saw a different one in the previous image where you suspend the meter stick from a rod. Here he actually built a stand for his, and he has reference masses, right? So I told them they could get reference masses if they want, or they could use pennies and nickels. I was actually surprised at how many students decided to go for purchasing the reference mass. So you can pause that. Thanks. Yeah, so that was my experience having students do basic physics experiments at home.
Awesome. Thank you, William. We have maybe time for one quick question if someone's got a quick question.
So when they were working in teams, did you have them basically each doing their own balance and then pooling their data? That's how they teamed up?
Well, so for the balance experiment, everyone was individual. That was the first one, just one-on-one. But for the latter three, I had one of the students in the group build the experiment and collect the data. So, and then we rotated that role so that everyone got a chance to do it once. Had them working in groups of 3.
Okay.
And another quick question, did you have any safety concerns?
Well, nothing terrible. I mean, these were all small objects at low speeds. So I'm trying to remember if there was anything that I explicitly asked the students to be careful about.
I mean, I'm not familiar, right? So if you ask a student to do this kind of experiment in their home or whatever, if they cut their hands or whatever, are we responsible?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. Like, I didn't ask anyone. It was possible to do all of these experiments without any well, you did have to cut string. That was, I think, the one thing you would have to cut. So no, I actually don't know the answer to that question.
I think that might be a good breakout discussion issue. So we'll save it for there. Okay, thank you, William. Okay, next up, we have Dr. Amit Sachi from Material Science and Engineering at UW-Madison.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here today and hear my colleagues' experiences in other area. I'm just presenting my experience with, in fact, a high enrollment course, the Introduction to Material Science and Engineering. We call it Intro. And the concepts of active learning, which we started several years ago and developed on that. Would you please change the slides? Is somebody? Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so the idea of this active learning was that the students watch pre-recorded lectures before coming to the class. And during class, they were engaged in various activities, group problem solving, micro projects, and so forth. So the challenge was the transition from this face-to-face classes last March to remote teaching, online teaching. And by the way, when I say high enrollment, this is about 200, on average 200 students each semester. And so what I try to do, ask the student to still do group problem solving during the live classes. Well, weekly homeworks and another activity which was called journal also was added, because in the online class I wouldn't see the students. So I decided to add a weekly journal, which was their personal response to some conceptual questions. And then I also try to use the concepts of projects. We call them micro project, macro project. And it is really challenging to keep these activities. And I try to give like about 50% of the weight to these activities. And have the lowest stake exams, around 50% of their grade for were their exams. And again, another challenge was how to take the exams and maintaining the integrity of the exam. The university has this honor lock for proctoring the exam, but the student didn't like them. So I tried to use Canvas power, Canvas facilities to design questions from banks. And so the Canvas would select randomly from different banks so that each student have different sets of questions. So, and I had the students, I had the exams during class time. And so that was about 50 minutes, 2 midterms, 1 final. And then another thing that would help a lot was weekly Modius points and some feedback, which kind of formative assessment to know what's going on, what are the problems, and this sort of thing. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are some activities which like we used to, in face-to-face class, use some practical demonstrations, such as like this shape memory alloy, which again, in the online version, I did it myself and recorded the video. I also used a lot of very interesting and fantastic practical and experimental videos on YouTube, and that would also help for this class. Of course, this class did not have any lab, but I always like to show them the practical aspects of what they read. Can I have the next slide, please? All right. And probably the more interesting was these micro projects. Again, using the Canvas, we had 3 macro projects during the semester. And so using the Canvas, I divided the students into various subjects depending on their interest. And during the live classes, we had about 3 hours of live lectures, which mostly they were problem solvings and some activities. And macro projects was another activities. They have to do the macro projects during the class, like in 3 sessions, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes during the class. Like in the face-to-face class, they used to sit around a table and communicate with each other and do these macro projects in a week. But in the online, I try to follow the suit and use this grouping in Canvas and ask them to do their projects during the class time, during the live class time. And depending upon the stage of the course, they had different macro projects. And in order to give them some incentive, these micro projects each had 5% of their grades. But then again, I use this incentive of best macro projects, and I gave them some bonus to encourage competition. And so it's really a challenge to teach a high enrollment intro course in these difficult times. But fortunately, the students like it. In fact, their scores have gone up compared to face-to-face class. And the enrollment has also gone up. My enrollment has increased about 50% since last March. And so it looks like that the students are also happy about the system. Of course, as I said, this course has been redesigned to be active learning, and we had a lot of practice quizzes, and the system has been set up during several years. And it's just that the transition to this remote teaching is really a challenge, again, to keep the standard. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Amit. Does anyone have a question? We have a question coming through the chat. Does it take more, less, or the same amount of time to prepare for this format of the class?
I think this format of class is taking much longer time. Yeah, it's much longer.
Would you continue to use this format going forward?
Well, obviously, if the situation relaxes and we can come back to face-to-face class, I would like to go back to face-to-face class.
Sure, of course. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. So we've got our next speaker is Yan Wu from Uw-Platteville. She is going to be talking about a lab specifically.
Okay.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
everyone. This is Yan Wu. I'm at Uw-Platteville. I'm sure that when the pandemic took place last year, educators across the nation or the world are kind of striving to their best to provide some laboratory experience to their students. And like, I believe lab experience are essential part of education in engineering and science field. So, okay, I was like very interested and excited to learn a lot of you use different ways to provide laboratory experience, like those like garage labs or the simulations lab, and then I know there's other of my colleagues are doing like a virtual lab using videos and all of these different ways to engage students. I'm here just to kind of introduce some of my experience using this way called remote access to perform labs. What we do, what we did here are two lab modules enabled by the remote access of atomic force microscope. Okay, atomic force microscope is an advanced instrumentation that is hosted in Uw-Platteville in the Nano Lab. And then we have several other advanced instrumentations over there. Each year we offers this nanotechnology course. And then when the pandemic took place and then we have to send students home, some of the worries of the students is they could not have the same experience of using those advanced instrumentations there anymore. So can we advance the slides, please? Yeah. Okay, so the setup are actually pretty easy and surprisingly easy. We do need to have an instructor in the lab doing some manning, okay? So we such as like loading the Afm tip, align the laser, and then bring the tip close to the surface. Those are the things that that an instructor can do, but pretty much from there on, the students can just use Zoom. There's a feature called the remote access. You can see on the top, in the middle of the presentation, okay, I have a top line that's showing there's a button in the Zoom, okay, and then you can just like give students the remote access, and then they can basically using their own computer, their own mouse to press buttons and then run things using a computer interface, just like they sitting in front of the computer in the lab and then run different experiments. So there are two labs I used for this method. One is the Afm Tip-Based Nanolithography Lab. You can see on the bottom corner of the bottom left corner of this presentation slides, students started we gave every student a turn to do the remote access. So they start with drawing something with their free hand using the mouse, okay? And then the goal right there is let them play with the parameters like the tip, force from the tip, the contact force, like they have different setting for that, and then the tip velocity so that they can see what is the effect and then finally arrive as a whole class, a conclusion, like what they found is the best parameter for a more complicated drawing. So in this little picture here is like we gave each student a turn and they free to draw. So you can see that some of the drawing is a smiling face, some are just writing down the COVID-19 as what they concerned most at that time, right? And then they found out the good parameters. So, and then before the class, we let students submit a pattern, a more complicated pattern. And then during the class, they can vote on which one to draw. So on that particular session, you can see on the top left, it is a pattern submitted by one student, and then everyone's loved this one. So we were able to etch into, you can see like a 10 by 10, around 10 by 10 micrometer. I think it's maybe 15 by 15 micrometer area with this complicated pattern there. Okay, so it's pretty exciting and engaging, most of all, for the students to be able to actually have a kind of a semi-real experience and operating these instruments by themselves at their home. Okay, and then I think another way to look at it is like students can kind of really took kind of ownership on their work and then their data there, while they can actually perform something alive. Okay, so another lab we did is for something that we traditionally do in the face-to-face mode is called the Harmonic Oscillator Lab. This typically involved like advanced instrumentation like the function generator, and then there's motors, and then there's like advanced data acquisition systems. These are not so easy to reproduce at a home setting, especially the function generator and everything over there. So in this case, atomic force microscope come to rescue again, right? So what we did is the model for this micro cantilever is can be modeled by this like a harmonic oscillator. And then what we did right here is we can change the local environment of this micro cantilever by adjusting the humidity, like by flowing in dry and then moisture air into this very small humidity cell. So during the lab, students are given a task like they need to sense the pico grams of water absorbed when the humidity on that micro cantilever, right? When the humidity changed from a low value to a high value. And then these tasks are like, we gave this task to students, and students need to design their procedure and then discuss their procedure with their group and then come with a plan. And then when the lab actually runs, and then they just need to let the instructor know like what kind of data they want to do, and then they just we are there just kind of just keep an eye on them, and then they just run them themselves in getting the data and then do this. And most we need to just help them with like kind of turning on some knobs in the lab. So it is a way again to engage students and then give them an opportunity at least to experience some advanced instrumentation during pandemic. Okay, so that's all. Yeah.
Fantastic. Does anyone have a question for Yan?
So Yan, this was for the EP lab course?
Yeah, for the EP lab course, like the harmonic oscillator one, I do have an option for a total fully online students to do this, and then they are doing this through the remote access of the AFM. Yeah.
Yeah, it caught me by surprise. I didn't realize this was for the course that doesn't normally use an AFM anyway. This is really cool.
Right. Yeah, when I developed that course, and I was thinking like all kinds of ways to how they actually can have a harmonic oscillator at home, and then do all the necessary like sensitivity analysis and all of these, also the design element of the experiment, how they actually figure out a way to carry out, not just following a recipe, follow the step, but they need to understand the physics and then also come up their own kind of procedure, so to say, to achieve certain goal. So this is one like solution for that Harmonic Oscillator Lab. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ian. Right, we're down to our final speaker today. And our final speaker is Hal Evanson from Engineering Physics at UW-Platteville.
All right, thanks, Gokul. Yeah, so I'm actually on a normal day, I'm sharing a wall with Yan. But yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit about our sensor lab. And I guess if you could flip to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about this lab. So this is a senior level lab for our engineering physics major. It's a laboratory only course. And so it meets for two 2-hour sessions per week. And we had 25 students in 2020, down from recent years, but still up there. And the general setup of the course is that they rotate around the room, working at different stations. If you can make out in the upper left corner is kind of a small picture. And these stations have different sensors. And so the overall goals of the course are for students to learn about the physics of different types of sensors, data acquisition, interfacing computers to sensors, a little bit of electronics, a little bit of posting data to the cloud, that kind of thing. And roughly speaking, every 2 weeks, they rotate around the room. We've got more stations than we have time. And so, every student, I guess, gets a different experience overall. And then at the end of this semester, we do have a final project where they have to apply a sensor to solve a problem for a customer. And so overall, this lab traditionally has been dealing with kind of sensors more related to manufacturing and other industrial uses. So kind of like the $200 per unit type of sensor. I've been meaning to get more microcontroller and smart sensor involved, right? Because microcontrollers and sensors are getting smaller, cheaper, and faster. So I've been meaning to do that, had not been. But then, you're right, the pandemic is coming. My wife's a family physician, so I was getting early warning alerts at home. And so I was starting to think about, how could we meet the goals of this course at home? And so I, decided that, okay, right, never let a good crisis go to waste. This was a good opportunity to kind of finally bear down and look at kind of these more microcontroller oriented labs and to try to come up with a set of experiments that students could do at home. So if you could flip to or add the next picture, please. And so, so the first part actually was I ran a survey. I had to talk to the students and find out what their technology needs were at home. So I asked about PCs and network availability, USB ports, their ability to install software like the Arduino software. Thankfully, right, these are seniors in engineering. So everybody had a PC with a USB port that they could install software on. The internet was spotty, but honestly, we were able to deal with that because telephones still worked, right? So given that background, I felt comfortable kind of ordering equipment. So I ordered all kinds of different sensors, the electronics, the wires. You can kind of see here the spread. And so we had just ordered these things. I thought I would have another week before campus shut down, and then it all shut down. And so I had a fun weekend where I was stuffing goodie bags for the students and basically getting them to the students on their way out of town. And so basically, campus shut down. The students had these kits, and there was nothing I had nothing yet for them to do. And so if you click on the next one, we had 2 weeks, basically a week for spring break and a week for faculty to completely overhaul their courses. And I think what was true for many of us was that turned into 2 weeks of hell as we overhauled our courses. And so I've got the list here of the labs in particular that we did, but I think, the main points I'd want to say is I was adapting the existing labs a bit. I had done some work for other courses, but also this kind of forced me to take a step back and look at the course in the big picture, right? The overall goals of the course really were to learn about how various sensors worked, interfacing to computers and coding, and not as much the particular details of what types of sensors they were using. Then the other thing I decided to do is flexibility. And so I kind of developed a suite of experiments, and I allowed them to kind of pick and choose among them which ones they were going to get done. That turned out well because a lot of them ended up selecting these things based on what they wanted their final projects to be. But then the other thing too, there's this technology piece, but then there's kind of the human piece too. They all had different experiences. Some of them were sharing a house with 3 siblings in school, plus a mom who was a public school teacher, right? So they could only work at night. Others were tending for sick relatives or what have you. And so I kind of had to take a step back and think, instead of going week to week to week, what are we going to get done over this 7-week span? And to kind of accommodate that, the other thing I rolled in was, I had Zoom meetings during my regular class periods where I was available for questions and urged, but did not require them to work kind of in tandem virtually, right? Everyone in their own basement. But what I also did is I did require them to have a weekly meeting with me at the end of the week. And that was a touch base, where are you? We'd talk about the past week, talk about the future week, and make plans. And so that way they kind of knew a little bit better where they stood. It was a great way to kind of maintain personal contacts, which of course was very hard, especially in these early days. They could get questions answered. It was way too much work, and I frankly would never do it again, though I am very happy I did it. So I guess I've got one more block there to show. I'm bumping up against my time here, but the lessons learned, one was, I'm embarrassed to say I was a little surprised, but the students really missed having partners, and that was on 2 levels. They learned together, and so that definitely makes the learning go more smoothly for them. And also at the other end too, they're learning from each other in a normal day, but they're not now, and it's all coming from this guy. And so it was a lot more pressure. And so that was something I hadn't anticipated. That weekly touch base was fantastic. Like I said, at the time I thought, I got to figure out how to do this again. There's no way. I would retire in 18 months if I had to do this every semester with every course. But it was a good thing at the time. The broad variety of experiments that came out of this was good. I'm in fact using it this semester because we're going half and half, and the students have the option and a lot more experiments to choose from. So the good news is I did have pieces that I could pick up and carry with me into the future. So, all right, with that, I'm way over time. So, but thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hal. I think Anne-Marie had a quick question, which I think may be answered. Anne-Marie, is your question answered?
Yeah, 2 sections, grand totaling 25 students. I violate all kinds of rules by not treating them as separate sections, but yeah.
Anyone else got a question for Hal? I have a quick question if there's nothing else. And that is, how do you distinguish between user error versus potential equipment defects or failure?
Yeah, so that was very hard. So, they would be doing Zoom calls, putting their cameras on their equipment, or they would be they've emailed me Arduino code. They would move their camera to their circuit board. So I'd try to troubleshoot that. I could sometimes send them code and say, well, try this. Does this work? It was very hard to talk them through that. It did actually inform this semester. So it's a senior level course, and our classroom is large enough and safe enough that we can say, you're all going to be here for a time. And so I actually required everyone to be here for the first half of the semester for that very reason, because most of the hard part was the programming language for them learning the new Arduino language. And so we're doing that in the room together, and it's going so much more smoothly this time. And that's helping to get a lot of the kinks out, mixing up input and output ports or not grounding common things together. We're able to kind of get all those common kinks out. But yeah, we muddled our way through thanks to video chats and emailing codes back and forth last time.
Sure. Okay, thank you, Hal. And thanks everyone for your presentation. There was quite a variety of different kinds of techniques and adaptations that we've been exposed to. That's quite the range there. Thank you so much. So I think next what we're going to do is we'll transition to a pair of back-to-back breakout sessions. Each of these is going to last about 15 to 20 minutes. And after the breakouts, I think what we'll do is we'll do breakout session 1, then we'll have everyone sent back to the main room. And then we'll go to breakout session 2. While you registered for this, you gave a first and second preference for your breakouts. And so we've pre-assigned you to breakout rooms. I think breakout 1 will happen instantaneously. Breakout 2 might take a little longer. And then we'll return after the breakouts for final remarks from WiSys President Arjun Sangha and announcements for the winners of the student presentations yesterday. Right. So so now each attendee is going to be moved into their breakout rooms in just a moment. And I think what will happen is you'll get a little box that says join breakout room. And so you just click that and you'll be sent to your breakout room, right? Also, I guess if anyone's still in the main room, when you're in the breakout room, turn on your video and audio and maybe switch to gallery view as well, okay? So go ahead, everyone, and join your breakout rooms. Okay, I think we're all back in the main room, and
hey,
I'm going to maybe hand the mic over to Jennifer Sauter at WiSys to take it from here.
Thanks very much, Gokul. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming today. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. Really great discussion, and really interesting to see how everyone has really adapted to the learning environment through the pandemic. So well done, and thank you again. So I'm going to turn things over to our President Arjun Sangha in just a moment to give some closing remarks and also to announce the winners of the student showcase from yesterday. Unfortunately, some of our students couldn't be here with us today, but if you are here and your name is called, please turn your video on just to give a wave. And if the student is not here and their faculty mentor is here, I would just ask that they maybe accept the award on their behalf. In addition to announcing the awards today, we'll also be doing some further social media promotion around the awards in the coming days, and we'll make an announcement on campus as well. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to our President, Arjun Sangha. Welcome, Arjun.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, that was great discussions in the breakout room, so that was really fun to watch. So first I wanted to go ahead with the awards and thank the Advanced Materials Industrial Consortium. Julie, thanks for your group for sponsoring the awards. Excited to announce them. I guess I need a production company to get a drum roll or something like that, but without further ado, second place with a $200 prize is Jacqueline Spory from UW-La Crosse, whose project focused on development of graphene zinc oxide thin films. I don't know.
And so, yeah, Jacqueline could not be here with us today, and her mentor, Seth King, also is not here. But maybe I'll accept it on her behalf, as she is one of our WiSys ambassadors at UW-La Crosse. So we'll definitely pass on our congratulations to Jacqueline.
Oh, that's great. And then first place with a $300 prize is Trevor Runick from UW-Platteville, whose project focused on development of an alternative to solvent-based microfabrication. Ah, there's Mark Levenstein clapping.
Trevor's not here, but he's my student, so I'll accept on his behalf.
Fantastic. And then we're also, for honorable mention, Joe Ambrose from UW Parkside and Ryan Glusick from UW Parkside. They're each going to get a $100 participation and honorable mention. So congratulations to them as well.
And Joel is here. So Joel, if you want to turn your video on and just give a quick wave, that would be great. Well done, Joel.
Well, I won't keep you all long. It's been a great, I guess, 3 days. So in closing, I'd like to commend you for coming together and participating in this forum. It isn't always easy to add another Zoom meeting or event to your day, and I thank you for being here. As we all know, responding to challenges such as COVID-19 requires collaboration, and that's what you've done here this week. You've shared stories, challenges, and successes. That's the start of collaboration and innovation. With that in mind, I'd like to thank our collaborators in presenting this virtual symposium. It's been a pleasure to work with Lori Schaefer from Kimberly-Clark, who provided the keynote, the Advanced Material Industrial Consortium, again, for sponsoring the prizes for the student presenters, and of course, the Regional Materials and Manufacturing Network, RM2N, for helping to organize this event. And I know we've been working with them for several years now, and I really have enjoyed seeing how it's grown. I wish we could have been in person, but we'll take this great virtual event instead. At WiSys, we're honored to work with many of this week's presenters in the past, facilitating cutting-edge research programs, commercializing discoveries, and working together to foster a spirit of innovation and entrepreneurial thinking across the state. It's been an honor to highlight their extraordinary work, made even more impressive by the fact that it happened in an extraordinary time. Let their successes serve as an example. Let their work inspire you to get started on your next innovative project as we emerge from this challenging time. Reach out to the speakers, students, attendees, and facilitators that you've met this week, and reach out to the WiSys staff. Our mission is to help people like you succeed. WiSys can help you fund your research projects, write your grant proposals, patent and protect your ideas, and take your inventions to the marketplace. And I'll leave you with this. In simpler times, it's not always easy to see or feel the relevance of your work. But from the story shared this week, I hope you realize the impact you can have on the world. Your work matters, your innovation matters, and your collaboration matters. So I thank all of you for participating in this event, and look forward to the next event, and look forward to working with each of you in any capacity that we can. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Arjun. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gokul. Thanks, RM2N, Julie. Hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Jennifer. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.